searching for answers.
Here are today's top stories.
It's been over 24 hours.
And the local news.
What we see are a lot of things that are going on the earth.
This is Art of Heaven News Talk.
Broadcasting live from WHPC Studios in Garden City, New York, this is Art of Heaven News Talk, where we deliver global, national, and local news through the lens of faith. I'm your host, Johnny Brumit, and joining me today are my co-hosts, the tech-savvy, storm-chasing, Bible scholar Dan Bartucci, and media personality and Netherlands native Arnold Koekoek. And a man, yes, a man is in the building as well, named Jesus. If you want to join the conversation, lines are open at 516-572-7440. It's 516-572-7440. Hit us up. Always starting with the biggest headlines of the week. Leaders from all over the world are meeting this week for the 79th annual United Nations General Assembly. Happening in the UN headquarters in New York City. It kicked off this week on Tuesday and will end this Monday coming up. This year's theme is Leaving No One Behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. That's this year's theme for the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York City. So we got a lot to cover in 28 minutes, right? There was multiple speakers that from all over the world. El Salvador, Barbados, China, Cuba. I mean, I got a whole list. Pakistan. There was so many speakers at this thing. I don't know how we're going to cover it all, but we're going to try to tackle it, all right? But I think it's only appropriate to start off with the most anticipated debate speaker, Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel. So we're gonna start right there. His speech, I watched the whole thing. I actually watched it a couple times because I went through, edited a couple things. And right off the bat, my feelings about this thing is, it's apparent. It's so obvious. I'm gonna call out the obvious. This world is so divided on this conflict in the Middle East. So divided. Because right when he walked up to the podium, many people were cheering and many people walked out. That's the first thing that happened. But I got to tell you, Israel is not playing. He brought up a lot. His speech was thorough. He covered everything. He did not stray away from anything, any topic going on. He brought up peace, first and foremost. He brought up the Abraham Accords and the alliance they had with Saudi Arabia. There was about to be like unprecedented deals worked out with Saudi Arabia right before October 7th. He brought up October 7th. He talked about the attack and the details again. He brought up the fact that Israel has destroyed 23 of 34 Hamas battalions and how the food aid that is going into Gaza was hijacked by Hamas. He said it as if like they fed their bellies. That's how he said it. And then they turned around and they raised the prices and sold it back to their own people for an expensive price. These are some of the details that he talked about. Then he turned it on Hezbollah. And he said that their attacks the day after, October 8th, if you will, was unprovoked. Their attacks. They just started shooting rockets at Israel the day after Hamas attacked. So these are some of the details of his speech. I mean, he then went and turned it on to Iran. He addressed Iran. Man, he addressed Iran pretty strongly. We're going to get to that. I got a couple sound bites for you. But, I mean, he addressed how that people are calling him a war criminal and they're trying to threaten to arrest him. And he said, quote, "The real war criminals are in Iran, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen." He called it right out. And this guy's a pretty strong leader. And it's pretty interesting the fact that he said that he spoke there at the UN General Assembly 40 years ago as Israeli ambassador to UN. And he even joked and said, I think it's the same exact podium here. But he made one strong point, and I encourage everyone to go back and listen to this speech. because there's a lot of people that walked out, but I don't get it. Like, you'd think that you'd want to listen to the guy, even if you didn't agree with him, and hear what he had to say, even if you wanted to pick it apart. So I just agree. I just encourage everyone to go back and listen to that. There's one part in the speech where he holds up 2 maps, and he says that there's a path to peace, and it goes from Israel through Saudi Arabia all the way to the Far East. And he said that there's so much potential there. They could run fiber optic lines and energy sources, and it can connect Europe all the way to the Far East. But then he said there's another path of terror, and he led that from Lebanon all the way to Iran. And he held up these maps. So it was a very powerful speech, in my opinion. That's kind of like the hot topic of the UN General Assembly. There's a lot of protesters down there, and if you're in Manhattan, I feel for you.
Yeah.
So that's my report on that speech. Now, we heard from a lot of different people, right? The other one that was the most powerful to me was Zelensky. But what are your thoughts, though, about this Middle East controversy between these nations?
One thing that you mentioned is, like, the room is divided, right? There's a lot of like, it's called United Nations. I guess the underlying goal was to unite, but we're not really united as a set of nations. And so what do you think is the underlying cause of it? Because to me, it feels like people work with 2 different sources of information, and there's some underlying cause for that division.
Yeah, this has been this has been a picking point I've had since the Columbia protests started here in New York. I like what you said. You need to be educated. You need to hear both sides of the speech, no matter what side you're on. I think that's the first step, Arnold, right? Because I think a lot of people are out there protesting right now on the east side of Manhattan and have no idea why. And there's a lot of people that are on the other side of it and really don't understand why. They're caught up in sound bites. They're caught up in what hits their Instagram feed, what hits their TikTok. But this is serious, what's happening in our world. But Johnny, like what you said, there's 2 paths. There's always 2 paths, right? There's a kingdom that's on top of this that has very different paths. Actually, when you said it, reminded me when Jesus is telling the story about the narrow gate and the broad gate, right? There's 2 paths. There's one way to go, and there's this different one. But I think as a Christian, I want to be on the side of peace in this one. And it feels like we're a long way from that.
Yeah. Well, you're on the side of peace, but what can you picture Canada sending over 8,000 rockets into the United States? What would you do then, Dan?
Yeah, look, Israel has a right to defend themselves, right? And I think that they are a target from what we see, what we know, and I think there's a lot of anti-Jewish, or there's a lot of hate towards the Jewish people. There's a lot of hate towards the nation of Israel. So, look, Netanyahu was up front. He was bold. He said what he's going to do, and I think he has a right to defend themselves. But I think whatever path we can find that Israel can exist as its state, and by the way, the contributions that that country can make to society in technology is unparalleled anywhere in the world. So people should want to work with Israel because they can improve quality of life. They can advance things like cybersecurity and technology. But we got to start somewhere, and I don't see that anytime soon.
Yeah, they got a lot to work out. He came out at the speech. He came out and said this first.
My country is at war, fighting for its life.
Now, some people don't recognize that, though. I feel like they see a lot of the news stories about these decimated blocks in Gaza, and it is decimated, But there's also probably a lot that were done. He defended himself and said, we've sent more aid in. We've dropped flyers in there. We've sent text messages. We've sent alerts, loudspeaker, like in every which way. But the fact is, they got hostages, and we're going in and getting them. And he followed up, though, and said, we don't want to do this. We've had patience for 20 years with Hezbollah, primarily, he said. And he said it like this.
And here's the truth. Israel seeks peace. Israel yearns for peace. Israel has made peace and will make peace again.
Yeah, he talked about the long history of trying to make peace. But man, what do you do when your enemies don't play fair, right? So
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here, right? I think the division is there's two sources of data, or there's like maybe we need a common source of data that is unbiased, right? So I think right now you have the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs that is responsible for a lot of the reporting, but they're accused of doing biased reporting. Well, how does that reporting happen? What methods are used? Transparency throughout the process is going to be key. And then the other piece that I think was just mentioned is key is listen to one another. But if we already don't know what's going on, people are kind of grasping for pieces of information, and everything you get is filtered and biased or, not consistent, and there is no transparency, it becomes very hard for the United Nations to function. I would say at this point, the United Nations is sick. It's not functioning the way it should.
That's a great point, Arnold. They say whoever controls media controls the world.
For sure.
And it's a scary thought, because you're just deceiving people. You're spinning stories and things. Now, I think one of the most dangerous parts of this Middle East conflict is between Iran and Israel. Mm-hmm. Right? You got these Houthis in Yemen, you got Hezbollah, you got different militant groups, you got Hamas. But really, it looks like Iran's behind it all. Now, it's funny because a representative from Iran spoke. The Iranian president spoke. And let me read you a piece of his speech here. It is not Iran that has established military bases along your borders. Okay, let me back up. He's saying this to the American people. He said, here, I want to address the American people. It is not Iran that has established military bases along your borders. It is not Iran that has imposed sanctions on your country and obstructed your trade relations with the world. It is not Iran that prevents you from accessing medicine. It is not Iran that has restricted your access to the global banking and financial system. It is not we who have targeted your military leaders. Rather, it is the United States that assassinated Iran's most revered military commander in the Baghdad airport. And he's referring to the 2020 assassination that was carried out. But this problem is not going away. These people, it's going to be very hard. We need peace, and I know what's going to bring the peace, and that's God help us. So to back up and look at this whole conflict, we got to recognize that this is a broken, messed up, sin-filled world we live in with people that just have a lot of problems. Now, God is not really a part of this going on down here. He's a major part, obviously, but when I say he's not affiliated with it, he has way bigger agendas. He has agendas like what's going on in your heart, your individual heart, Dan, your heart, Arnold, you listening, what's going on in your heart, your mind, your body, with your life. And I think God just wants to connect with each one of us. And the greatest rule is to love each other. Mm-hmm. So that's going to solve the problems in the world, but the world is the world. And we know it's not going to be a pretty place anytime soon or ever. True?
I think it's going to take the King of Kings. You can bring all the nations together and all the leaders, but you need a King of Kings to clean up this mess at the end of the day. But he could use us to do it too.
Yeah, and I think each of us are called in a unique way to do such a thing. I think what you're saying, Johnny, about loving starts with listening, right? But each of us can make an impact in our own personal world that you would hope would transpire into a broader wealth of your family, your neighborhood, your community, your city, your nation. But we're called to live in this world, and the world is pretty broken right now. And I think we're fueled a lot on just what we can see, what we consume. And again, I think what you said at the beginning of this thought, Johnny, was actually right on. It's how we are consuming information, right? I think there's a lot of hate for Israel and the prime minister because what you're consuming, on Twitter, on any social media feed, are those images in war-torn Gaza. And you actually can't see the terrorists planning this or the other side. And the further we get away from last October, the further those... So people are just quick to see. And I I won't pull us here. But when news, if something broke right now, where are you going? You're probably not going to the radio or local news, right? Unfortunately, right? You're gonna pull up X, and you're gonna see who's posting.
Now, look, a great point. A reminder again about the media. He who controls the media controls the world, right? Now, I read this quote from the Iranian president, and that's his point of view. And I actually really loved hearing his point of view because he makes a great point.
But he's playing on that, John. Right? He's playing on the images. You don't see what Iran is doing. Yeah, you cannot go and see the nuclear plans that they're building. You cannot go see how they're indoctrinating people into the cause to go kill the Jewish nation. You don't see that.
Yeah, he did say he wanted to wipe Israel off at one point.
Yeah, make no mistake.
That's the point. This is the point. Like these people, like Hamas too, like right, death to Israel, death to America, whatever. Right? You can, when you make statements like that, you can work all you want to try and bring peace, but to bring peace, everyone has got to want peace. If someone wants war, there's a good possibility you will have war.
But do you blame the Iranian people if they were to believe this? And because a lot of what he said is true. We have military bases along their borders. They don't have military bases on our borders.
You can't blame them. They have state-controlled media.
Yeah, and let me just play a clip though from Benjamin Netanyahu's address. And this is a scary one, and he's directing it right at Iran.
There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach.
Wow. He went as far as to say we could reach anywhere in the Middle East.
And they can.
And you know what? I don't think they're going to take that power for granted. They went in and they are unrelenting to get Hamas, and now they're going to deal with Hezbollah, but I don't think that they are this mad war machine. They are really for peace. That's what I got away from his speech. If you think differently, go and check it. Or you could hit us up and let me know your thoughts here at Art of Heaven News Talk. Call me up, 516-572-7440. Bottom line is, this is what he proudly proclaimed in his speech.
And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning.
And that's just what he's doing. He said he's not giving up unless they put their arms down and they give over the hostages. So that's how it's unfolding. Art of Heaven News Talk you're listening to. On to our next story here. Now, we got some talk about broken, screwed up people and corrupt people in this world and in the world of politics. We got our own New York City mayor indicted this week for multiple charges, 5 different charges, federal charges, fraud. They got him for federal bribery. They got him receiving campaign contributions by foreign nationals. They got him on all kinds of big charges. So it's not looking too good for Mayor Adams. I'll just say that.
Yeah, tough day. Well, anyway, I think, and the timing is interesting, right? Because I think politically, the timing might be a little curious, but at the same time, I think, so it may even help the case against Trump, right? To sort of show like, hey, see, we're really attacking all bad things here, and it's not just political. But at the end of the day, there's some. I think the big difference here is that there's some real texts that are leaking out and coming to the surface that don't look good for the mayor.
Yeah, he kind of busted. He broke the rule, the golden rule.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I feel we took a step into the original Batman movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. Like, we are Gotham City now. We're broken in a lot of ways in the city, and we have some corruption at the highest levels. And yeah, I think Arnold, what I've read, it doesn't look good. Anytime you have to publicly admit, I'm going to go delete these text messages, you're probably not doing something above board. So this is going to be super interesting. He had a wild press conference this week. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see it, where people came out just to vouch for his character. But the more that's coming out from this, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good for the city of New York.
Yeah, he says he's not giving up. Governor Koekoek could actually use her power to remove him. Right? And she actually made a statement that said, prove it to me. Prove it to me you're innocent.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, we always say, innocent until proven guilty. Here it kind of works the other way around. I'm still like, okay, innocent until proven guilty, but you got a lot of evidence that's out there with the text messages where some of his staff is negotiating. No, don't charge us $50 for the ticket, at least $1,000 because people are watching them and watching him and stuff like that. It's out there. And so, once it's out there, it's hard to take that back. And at the end of the day, it's impossible to explain that away with, good intentions.
As the kids say, right? There's receipts. And there seems to be some receipts on this one.
Yep.
Yeah, listen, you get rid of your paper trail. Come on. So, Mayor Eric Adams, he was in court today. He was indicted. He was, for surely dealing with this. This ain't going away. And some of the details you're talking about, though, Arnold, is he took up to $100,000 in some of these cases, and one of them is from government officials in Turkey.
Yes.
Nonetheless, I mean, how you get connections with Turkey? And so Eric Adams, he was the Brooklyn borough mayor before New York City, and even it goes back like 10 years, back to those days. And I guess they're saying that Turkey paid him some money, and they had some properties like, in the works, and he just passed it through.
Yeah, the rub is, or the accusation is, right, that he fast-tracked some FDNY inspections to get the building open here, and they have another planned building that they have in the city that just, bypassed all the regulatory red tape, apparently. And then, there's a lot of first-class flights, a lot of high-end vacations, to say, in Turkey. So, again, it doesn't look right, but, I'd have to say from a conscience point of view, and you're taking this back on yourself, if you got to delete stuff, if you have to, in a conversation, if I'm texting you, Johnny, and I'm like, hey, yeah, I probably should delete this later, probably not doing something above board.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Now look at what's the old saying? If you wouldn't write it and sign it, don't say it. Maybe you should have thought twice about doing any of this stuff. But it goes back to some of these biblical truths. I'm going to point out one. I mean, in the Bible, it says, these leaders are held to a higher standard of judgment. Exact words from James. And many, many times it says, they're put in positions and they must live by higher standards. So I just want to point out that if you're in a position of power, I'm on this microphone right now, I need to keep that in the forefront. I need to live to a higher standard. I need to carry myself appropriately. And I don't know how he got away with it this long, and how he thought that he wasn't going to get busted,
I like that you go to look. Scripture's a good place, right? If you're going to base some of your life decisions out of, you can go back in the Old Testament. You can read about a lot of kings who had power, positions of leadership, and didn't do the right thing, and how that worked out.
Okay, this is Art of Heaven News Talk, so I got another story for you. You can call us up here, 516-572-7440, 90.3 WHPC. Now, this story this week was, to me, the biggest story. I could have started with this one. This guy got executed in Missouri. And a lot of people, even prosecutors, saying, hey, he might be innocent. And there was an opportunity for the Supreme Court to stop it, and they declined. So this one's going to be a tough one. But I really think that we should have this conversation, all right? A man was executed. He could have been innocent. Maybe he wasn't. Now, is it right, first off, for anyone to execute anyone?
Yeah, I don't think so, right? But it's more like, okay, so from a biblical point of view, right, it says, some people have the translation that says, "Thou shall not kill," but it's more accurately translated as, you shall not murder, and it's not murder if it's, capital punishment. But if I look at, how Jesus acted, right, he would not execute a woman that had committed adultery, and he even instructed people, hey, you want to cast the first stone, if those without sin go cast the first stone, which puts a requirement on, hey, if you want to do the execution, yeah, you could do it, but if you're without sin. That's the requirement now. And you're like, okay, well, that doesn't really work. But I'm, for one, struggling anyway in terms of love, right? I look at all the people that are in the Bible that were murderers. Like, we had Saul that was turned into Paul. He was a persecutor of Christians. I, for one, am very grateful that he he didn't receive capital punishment, because we would be lacking a lot of pieces of the New Testament today. So, so that's
great example.
Yeah,
great
and
example.
so you bring up Paul, right? And that takes me to Romans, and in Romans 12, right, he's talking about love, and actually, I think there's Paul's writing in here. I'll just say real quick where he says, "Do not take revenge, dear friends. Leave room for God's wrath." Right? It's not for us, and God's ways are not our ways. So I think, as hard as it is, I don't think that's for us to execute. Yeah.
God says, "Vengeance is mine."
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think we should leave it up to him.
Yeah. So, hey, I'm not going to go and be the one to pull the switch or do the injection or whatever, but listen, I mean, what would you do if one of your kids has a gun to their head? Are you going to take the dude out? Think about it.
Well, that
It's not
becomes
easy.
self-defense, right? Or defense.
Well, I think,
That's a different story, I think. But because we hear the deed was already done, the damage was done. It's more like, now are you going to punish the guy and give him the same issue?
Well, it's a tough conversation to be had, but I think that end of the day, you just want to pray your way through each situation, and God's going to show up. Have that faith, and it's going to work out. Might not be pretty, it might get a little ugly at times, but hey, if you got faith and trust in God, then I think everything will work out for those that are called according to his purpose. This is Art of Heaven News Talk on 90.3 WHPC. I want to thank Dan Bartucci, Arnold, Koekoek. My name is Johnny Brumit. Blessed to do this. You can check out the podcasted version of this show on any platform. Have a blessed week.